Hey everyone, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan. Coming up on this week's episode, it was a rough weekend for IT pros as multiple services experienced outages. Also, Skype is set for retirement in just a few weeks. And a report suggests workers returning to the office will face greater monitoring than ever before. For this and more, keep listening to this episode of the podcast, which of course, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. And that includes Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops. And also brought to you by Master Packager, who make an application packaging software that helps you build packages that end users love, enterprises want, and the Windows OS needs. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. First up this week, Microsoft has announced that Skype will be retiring in May of this year, so just a few weeks away. It'll actually be May 5th. For those who have subscriptions and automatic top-ups, existing subscriptions will continue to automatically renew until April 3rd. After this, all subscriptions will be retired and no longer be available for purchase, renewal, or reactivation. If you have a Skype number, your Skype number subscription will also continue to automatically renew until April 3rd and will remain active until the end of your next renewal period. If you have a Skype number and you need to port it, you'll need to contact your new provider directly. And honestly, I looked into this and it's a little more complicated than you might expect, at least for some services. Skype Manager users can purchase and renew paid products, including automatic credit top-ups, again until April 3rd. After this date, only existing credit balances can be allocated to group members for calling. And for SMS services, these will be discontinued on May 5th. And for Skype Dialpad, after May 5th, the Skype Dialpad will be available for remaining paid users from the Skype web portal and Teams, where you will continue to be able to use your subscriptions or Skype credits. I'm guessing that the Skype number and obviously the credits are the most time sensitive of issues. At least it sounds like some of the credits can be used going forward. But for those Skype numbers, if you don't move it before the service goes, then you might lose that number. So you need to act fast. There has been a new Windows 11 24H2 upgrade block put in place by Microsoft, this time for devices with AutoCAD version 2022 due to compatibility issues that prevent the program from launching. According to Microsoft, this known issue affects all AutoCAD 2022 versions, but other AutoCAD releases are unaffected. So, for example, older and also newer like 2023 and 2024 seem to work fine. They say that after installing Windows 11 version 24H2, all versions of Autodesk AutoCAD 2022 may not open on some devices, and users have reported encountering an error when launching the application, according to bleepingcomputer.com. The block on the Windows 11 2024 update for H2 is applied in Windows updates, so people with that software installed will not get the availability or prompt for the Windows 11 24H2 on their devices at this time. According to bleepingcomputer.com, a recent DNS change triggered DNS resolution failures for the autologon.microsoft.azure.ad.sso.com domain when customers tried to access Azure services on February 25th between 5:18 p.m. UTC time and 6:35 p.m. UTC time. Microsoft said as part of a cleanup effort to remove duplicate IPv6 CNAMEs, a change was introduced which removed a domain utilized in the authentication process for Microsoft Entra ID's seamless single sign-on feature. Once removed, the domain could no longer be resolved and requests for authentication would fail. I guess at least it seems like this one lasted just over an hour, so it wasn't that long, and the change was reverted, which ended up resolving the problem. And speaking of outages, Saturday evening Irish time, thousands of reports flooded in of people being unable to access Outlook, with speculation that it was caused by, again, our old friend DNS. Now, I recorded this podcast early for this week, because I am traveling. But as of recording this on Sunday evening, there was no reason for this outage provided by Microsoft, and they stated it only impacted a limited number of customers, and the all clear was given 30 minutes after the initial confirmation of an outage. Now, purely speculative on my part, but if they were performing a cleanup and it caused an outage in the past for the SSL that I just talked about, stands to reason that perhaps they were still doing some cleanup that caused some disruption for Outlook on Saturday. Hopefully this is not a sign that there's going to be more services affected if they're continuing the cleanup for the next few days or weeks. And once again, speaking of outages, unfortunately it was a pretty bad weekend for IT professionals, as there were also reports online of an outage for some Citrix customers, with Christian Jons on Twitter and Blue Sky and LinkedIn, I believe, warning that they had an issue with build 51,51000 of the license server where the license were no longer available. Unfortunately, the way to fix this issue was to downgrade to build 49,000 as a workaround. Now, I saw some other information out there online just from people who were experiencing the problem, and maybe some people who are not even experiencing the problem themselves, but were aware of some of the issues. For example, there's a thread on Reddit suggesting it was specific for CSP customers. But either way, it does not seem to have been at least publicly confirmed by Citrix as of yet. At this time, I checked their website, I checked their social media accounts to see if there was anything reported on this, but at least at the time of this recording, there was not. So if you are experiencing this problem, I mean, if you already were, you probably already resolved it, but if you haven't, and perhaps you're not a 24-hour operation, you find a problem on Monday morning, you're going to have to downgrade. Show sponsor Master Packager released a new version 25.2.9187, and there's been several changes, not just to the main Master Packager product itself, but also to the Master Packager Master Wrapper, and also the Dev product too. So just an example, the remove all subkeys and values on install option should automatically update component key paths now. Changing a file's component in the file editor to a non-existing component should now create the component for you. And there's several other enhancements and updates listed in the release notes, which I'll share with this episode, which is episode 376, and you can find that over at 5bytespodcast.com. The material theme free and material theme icons free extensions available in the Visual Studio Marketplace have been removed after being alleged for containing malicious code. The extensions have been installed nearly 9 million times in total, with users receiving alerts in VSCode that the extensions have automatically been disabled. Researchers discovered suspicious code in the extensions and reported their findings to Microsoft, according to bleepingcomputer.com. The creator of the extensions states there was nothing malicious. They were relying on an outdated dependency which got flagged, but from what I can see, there is no indication from the researchers or Microsoft on what they believe the goal of the malicious code was. Like, what was the intent of what they're alleging was malicious code. Microsoft says they will publish more details about the extension and any detected malicious activity to the VS Marketplace GitHub repository soon. Good news! Microsoft has fixed the known issue that broke email and calendar drag and drop in the classic Outlook version. If you want to fix this for yourself, you'll just need the latest preview cumulative update for Windows 11 24H2. Recently, Firefox introduced terms that grant Mozilla, quote, a non-exclusive, royalty-free worldwide license to use that information, end quote, when users upload content through the browser, prompting competitor Brave to suggest a business pivot toward data monetization by Mozilla. Mozilla responded to this outcry about the changes and allegations that will allow them to enable harvesting of data for AI services by stating, quote, These changes are not driven by a desire by Mozilla to use people's data for AI or to sell it to advertisers. Our ability to use data is still limited by what we disclose in the privacy notice." End quote. The company clarified that its AI features operate locally on users' devices and does not send content data to Mozilla. Any data shared with advertisers is provided only on a de-identified or aggregate basis, according to Mozilla. Mozilla also explained it used specific legal terms like non-exclusive, royalty-free, and worldwide because Firefox is free, available globally, and allows users to maintain control of their own data. Now, the skeptic in me is probably leaning more towards what Brave has claimed and what some people have been worried about online about this. But let's wait and see, huh? Prove us wrong, Mozilla. Prove us wrong. A global industry analyst by the name of Josh Berlin has suggested the reason for the push to return to the office is because CEOs expect this is going to eliminate a lot of jobs, which is something that a lot of people have been speculating about. But it's also been inferred that organizations don't necessarily know what people are doing when they're working from home, which makes it more difficult, I guess, to target their layoffs when they do have layoffs, which I'm not so sure about. But what I did think was interesting was the article by Ars Technica goes on to suggest that those returning to the office will encounter newer technology used to monitor time, attendance, and in some cases the productivity of workers in sectors such as manufacturing, retail, and fast food chains, such as RFID badges that are obviously used in those settings already, may be introduced to offices for office workers, GPS time clock apps, NFC apps, QR code clocking in, Apple Watch badges, and palm, face, eye, voice, and finger scanners. Biometric scanners have long been sold to companies as a way to avoid hourly workers buddy punching for each other at the start and end of shifts. So I know from my retail days, I would have been asked by people, hey, sent a text message or something like that saying, "I'm running late, can you clock me in so I don't get dinged?" And it sounds like these methods would avoid that happening. A return to office mandate and its enforcement opens the door for similar scenarios for those salaried office workers too, I guess. Or at least that's the claim. And they gave an example of a study that Cracked Labs published in November 2024, showing how systems of wireless networking, motion sensors, and Bluetooth beacons, whether intentionally or as a byproduct of their capabilities, could provide behavioral monitoring and profiling in office settings. So I guess that makes sense, right? If you're getting up from your desk and roaming around the building for most of the day and not actually doing your work at your cubicle or in your office, then you're probably going to be picked up roaming between access points if your device is connected to the wireless. They also mentioned Logitech, who have millimeter wave radar spot sensors, which are designed to allow employers to monitor whether rooms are being used and which rooms in the buildings are used the most. And a Logitech rep told The Verge recently that the peel and stick devices, which also monitor VOCs, temperature, and humidity, could theoretically estimate the general placement of people in a meeting room. So getting down to exactly where in a meeting room someone might be. There are many more examples of how technology is being used to possibly monitor the movement of people in office settings within this article. And I'll just share the link with this episode if you want to read it for yourself. But I at least found it pretty interesting. I don't agree with absolutely every inference made in the article. But yeah, definitely some food for thought with some of the technological advancements that have been made since 2020 and how those might be used in offices where there's a return to work in the office mandate. But now, this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. First up this week, a tip or a script really, a PowerShell module for displaying Windows Toast notifications. So I think something similar to this was one of the first tips that I gave on the podcast. It's something I try to incorporate into a lot of my automated workflows. And this particular module, which is the BurntToast PowerShell module, seems to provide a lot of flexibility in how you can customize these toast notifications. So it's pretty cool. Next up, the awesome Guy Leach shared a PowerShell commandlet that you can use in order to see what DLLs are loaded when a PowerShell module is loaded. So this is a pretty interesting one, and it's not something I've tried to do, but yeah, I could definitely see how this would be useful, so I'll share that with this episode. Also, I saw the awesome Lee Jeffries shared a link to sign up for an NFR license for LoginVDI. So I know that I believe like the Go EUC team leverages LoginVDI for a lot of their great studies. And if you'd like to try and get some of that useful data from your home lab, for example, you could sign up for this and use their software to achieve it. Finally, I'd just like to say a quick congratulations to Killian Brouder of Galway United. For those who listen to the podcast regularly, you may know that I sponsor my local soccer team, Galway United, who are playing in the League of Ireland Premier Division. And I also sponsor a player. And the player that I've happened to sponsor for the last couple of years is Killian Brouder, who scored a goal to equalize against Drogheda United on Friday. Killian is a center back, so he doesn't score a lot of goals. So I figured it was worth highlighting when he did. But that's it for this episode of the podcast. Apologies for getting this one out a little bit earlier than usual. I didn't want to miss a week, but hopefully you still got value out of this one. And luckily or unluckily, I guess, there was a lot of news over the weekend with those outages, so it actually seemed pretty timely to get an early episode out. But thank you so much for listening.